The next morning, beneath a rising amber sun, Ibrahim Traoré stood barefoot on the roof of a modest residence overlooking the city skyline. Below him, the same streets that once blocked his path now pulsed with silent reverence. The crowd hadn't come for spectacle. They came because something had shifted. The man they had seen humiliated at the gate was now their mirror, their brother, their proof that dignity could still bloom through the cracks of injustice. Journalists camped on sidewalks, but Traoré didn't come out for interviews. Instead, he walked down the staircase holding a pair of worn shoes, ones he'd worn as a soldier years ago. As he laced them on his feet, his aide asked gently, "Sir, will you address the backlash?" There had been murmurs online, doubtful voices wondering if his humility was staged. Traoré didn't answer. He just looked up and said, "I'll show them what silence looks like when it leads." And he stepped into the day like a man with no crown to defend. That day he visited a dilapidated neighborhood, one not shown on travel brochures. Children ran barefoot. Old men played chess with bottle caps. No cameras followed him, only the sound of sandals on dirt roads. He met a woman repairing torn school uniforms. When asked why she did it for free, she said, "Because I saw you walk with no guards. I knew then we could do the same." In another corner, a group of teenagers had begun painting murals inspired by his walk to the arena. One depicted a bench, not golden, not regal, just simple wood. Beneath the words, "We rise by sitting beside the fallen," Ibrahim paused, stared at it and whispered, "They saw what mattered." Meanwhile, on screens across the nation, the speechless moments of the event had gone viral again. Not the words, the silences, the look on a little girl's face, the fold of cloth from a soldier's daughter, the hug of a man who wasn't supposed to matter. These were the testimonies that now threaded through dinner tables and radio waves. The people didn't just watch, they felt seen. Later that evening, a private meeting was requested by a coalition of foreign diplomats who had watched the week unfold in quiet discomfort. They asked to advise Traoré on the narrative. One said, "Sir, we must consider global perception." Another added, "This vulnerability, it can be misunderstood." Ibrahim stood still. No anger. Just a long pause before he said, "If perception demands I sit on a throne, then truth will disappoint it." The room fell quiet. A diplomat tried again. "But you're being called a revolutionary now." He replied, "I'm just doing what our ancestors were punished for, walking freely, speaking softly, and refusing to kneel." And with that, he excused himself. Outside, the rain had started to fall softly. It kissed the ground like a benediction. By dawn, something unprecedented began unfolding. Across multiple regions, citizens began organizing mirror marches. No speeches, no placards, just people walking in silence. Market vendors, teachers, sanitation workers, elders in wheelchairs. A man held a photo of his son who had died at a border checkpoint years ago. "Today," he said to a stranger, "I walk him home." The internet lit up with images of ordinary Africans reclaiming dignity, not through protest, but presence. And at the center of it, Traoré remained invisible. He was not posing, not speaking. He was sitting beneath a mango tree with a blind elder, letting her describe her memories of pre-colonial schooling. Her voice cracked as she said, "I never thought a president would ask what my childhood tasted like." His only reply, "It tasted like yours built mine." The climax came quietly, with a simple email. A request from the United Nations invited Ibrahim to deliver a global address, not as a political leader, but as a voice of moral authority. The subject line read, "Reimagining Leadership in a Fractured World." Traoré didn't respond immediately. Instead, he asked to visit the rural clinic where the midwife Awasanu once worked. The walls still bore the scars of rebel attacks. A child there recognized him, gasped, and led him to a room with a cracked window pane. "This is where my brother was born," she said. He nodded and sat on the edge of the bed, whispering, "Then this is where my future began." Only after that did he accept the invitation. When he arrived at the UN headquarters weeks later, he wore the same dust-stained white shirt he had worn during his walk to the arena. No tailored suit, no entourage, just a folded note in his hand. The hall was filled with global leaders, economists, military commanders. Ibrahim walked alone to the podium, looked out at the crowd, and began not with words, but with silence. For 10 full seconds he looked into the eyes of the room. Then he unfolded the note. It wasn't a speech, it was the same photo he had held up in the arena, the little boy with torn sandals. "This," he said softly, "is who I answer to." Gasps again. Then he continued, "You speak of development. I ask you, can you develop what you've never listened to?" He paced slowly. "You plan aid. We live consequences. You draft resolutions. We bury our farmers." His voice didn't rise, but it pierced. Leadership is not dominance. It is knowing when to sit down and who you sit beside. He told no sob stories. He made no indictments. He simply said, "If your systems exclude the barefoot, they will one day walk past them. And when they do, the world will not ask your permission." Then he ended with a simple phrase that echoed through every chamber. "Let your policies feel like a mother's hand, not a border's wall." The room sat stunned. Some clapped. Others simply stared. But in the corners of the world, watching, small schools, refugee camps, rice fields, prison blocks, there was weeping. Because someone had finally spoken a language they understood. Human. When he returned to Burkina Faso, there were no parades. He requested none. Instead, he asked for a day of silence across the country. Businesses paused. Schools held reflection. Circles. At 12 noon, bells rang across villages, and in homes people lit candles, not in mourning but in memory of what they had seen. A president who knelt to return a stained cloth, a soldier who cried at his own duty, a girl who held her father's final keepsake. A bench that meant more than any throne. That day, the streets were empty, but the air was full. In the weeks that followed, subtle changes began to appear. Community schools received anonymous donations. Broken roads near rural villages were suddenly repaired. Local artists were commissioned to paint public murals of service, not war. And the security officer who had once blocked the president? He was promoted, not as a punishment or a token gesture, but because he had come to symbolize what it meant to follow rules with honor. He now trains young recruits on how to recognize dignity, no matter the clothes it wears. Traoré rarely spoke of that week again, but those who watched him closely noticed something. Every Sunday he walked alone to a tree near the city's edge, and sat. Just sat. Children often gathered there. He would draw shapes in the dirt with them, sing old songs, and listen, always listen. One day a boy asked, "Why do you keep coming here?" Traoré replied, "Because kings sit on gold, but leaders sit where the future plays." That image of a man in sandals beside children in dust, became the symbol etched on the new national stamp. Not because it captured power, but because it captured presence. No slogans, no speeches, just silence filled with meaning. Just the leader the world hadn't expected but deeply needed. A man who showed that leadership is not proven in what you demand at the gate, but in how you walk when it's closed. And so the story was no longer just about a gate or a mistake. It became a legacy, a blueprint, a quiet revolution, and across the continent, children now say, not with fear but with hope. One day I will walk like him,